There's so many things that could be argued as over the line in a political season where we've, we've heard people blatantly saying that Barack Obama is a terrorist. So it's sort of like, what officially is over the line?
Well, they
here?
haven't said that. They said he pals around with terrorists, which we'll come back to. But so you have to draw the line first. Where would you draw the line? Pro-America areas, acceptable rhetoric or not?
I think it's stupid, but there's nothing illegal about saying something stupid on a campaign trail. I mean, and I think that when it's sort of taken, it's sort of been a bad week for them in terms of messaging and saying things like this. You had, Joe McCain calling parts of Virginia communist country, and then you have Sarah Palin making a gaffe like this, which might not have been that big of a deal had it not sort of come in unison with these other things that were getting covered, like Michelle Bachmann's comments and Joe McCain's comments.
Right,
Again,
we'll get to
over the
Bachmann
line,
in a minute.
I think it's more about them being stupid as opposed to them being over the line.
Well, there's no law against political stupidity, you're right.
Exactly.
But Amanda Carpenter, would it be advocacy journalism to say Sarah Palin said this, and this is obviously unfair, this is obviously troubling, this is obviously a questioning of some people's patriotism?
I think that would be advocacy journalism. I think it's appropriate when a candidate makes a statement like that. Barack Obama had similar statements when he talked about voting people in Pennsylvania being bitter, clinging to their guns. And in both occasions, people asked him, what did you mean by that?
And he got reamed by the media.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think it's appropriate for the media to ask for clarification. This reporter asked Sarah Palin for clarification. She said, okay, if that's what you meant by it, I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. So, people on both sides of the aisles do this sort of demographic divisiveness. That we have the East Coast being called the parentheses of the United States now, and people talking about the real American down home. I mean, we need to know what they mean by that and what they're intoning, and that's appropriate to ask.
Sorry, but it's not our job to save candidates or their surrogates from gaffes, Howard. I mean, in fact, that's how we all make our living, is by challenging them.
No, it's our job to call them on it. If you indeed think it's a gaffe. I mean, I personally am a little tired of this real America stuff and this idea that New York and Washington are not the real America.
Apparently, Jon Stewart agrees with you.
All right, all right. Let me get to Michelle Bachmann. You mentioned the Congresswoman, Republican Congresswoman from Minnesota. She made some news on hardball a few days ago. Let's just play it, and we'll get your thoughts on the other side.
So you believe that Barack Obama may have anti-American views?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very concerned that he may have anti-American views. I wish the American media would take a great look at the views of the people in Congress and find out, are they pro-America or anti-America?
So this raises the same issue, Kelly Goff. Is it fair for journalists to take those comments, blow them up, talk about them, and say that they're outrageous?
Look, it's absolutely fair for us to repeat back the words that people say and ask them to defend them. That is absolutely fair. Something that Michelle Bachmann seemed to learn the hard way, since I think it was yesterday, she filmed a political advertisement apologizing for her poor word choice. Again, I think that there's no law against people making a criticism, even if we think it's stupid or even find it offensive. I think the question then becomes asking them to defend it. That's the job of the media, is to call people on things, to recognize them, and then challenge them to defend it. Just like Barack Obama was forced to defend using the bitter terminology.
What was fascinating after her Democratic opponent received something like $2 million in contributions is that Michelle Bachmann, doing a bit of damage control, went on the O'Reilly Factor, and she had this to say about that hardball interview.
The reason why I went on, I knew that Chris Matthews was a leftist, but I didn't know the kind of traps that he lays for people. I should have known more about that he lays a trap.
Amanda, where exactly was the trap here?
Well, full disclosure, Michelle Bachmann does blog at townhall.com very regularly, so we'll put that on the table. But that interview was incredibly aggressive. I mean, Matthews, I think, was literally trying to put words in her mouth, and he's saying, you name me how many members of Congress you think are anti-American. That's not a question a journalist asks. That's a debate tactic. And her saying that she has concerns that Barack Obama hangs out with people who have anti-American views is legitimate. To say that he tolerates radicalism is legitimate.
Well, I have the transcript here. Let me just clarify this. She is talking about the relationship between Barack Obama and Bill Ayers. Fine. And Matthews follows up and says, do you believe that Barack Obama may have anti-American views? We just saw that. And she says, absolutely. And then she makes the comment of members of Congress. And yes, then he's very aggressive in following up. But there's no trick question here. I mean, she's the one who made the statement.
But he goes after her and says, how many people do you think are anti-American? She never said anybody was anti-American. She said that Barack Obama may have anti-American views because of his relationship with William Ayers. I think that is legitimate.
What about
Why didn't they talk about that?
What about the part where she says the media should investigate which members of Congress are anti-American?
Yeah, if there's other people that are hanging out with William Ayers, I think those are valid questions.
Kelly?
Howard, just because it's like the age-old adage of when someone asks a politician, when did you stop beating your wife? That's not the media's fault if the politician says yesterday. right? And so just because someone's given the news doesn't mean they have to hang themselves with it. And so I think criticizing a journalist for being aggressive, it's sort of like this is one of the few times I've seen someone defend saying something stupid with allegedly pleading ignorance.
He was
where
putting
she said,
words in her mouth. If
sorry,
you watch
Amanda,
that clip.
I'm not finished. I mean, she actually said, I wasn't familiar with the show. That was her first defense. I'd never seen the show. Then the second part of the show is, I'm familiar with the show and knew he was a leftist, but I didn't realize he would be asking me tough questions. Apparently, that's not entirely true, or she wouldn't have felt the need to cut an advertisement to save her seat.
There's no doubt that Hardball with Chris Matthews has taken a dramatic turn and becoming more aggressive and more promoting the Democratic cause. I think if you watch it over the past year, I mean, he's been ripped in the media by journalists of all colors.
If he can't handle aggressive questioning, perhaps he shouldn't go on television.
Well, he was also ripped in the media for being unfair to Hillary Clinton, who is, of course, a Democrat. I can't agree with you on this one point about he put words in her mouth. She used that phrase, anti-American, several times. Let me move on. As you all recall, it was just last Sunday that Colin Powell went on Meet the Press and delivered a pretty full-throated endorsement of Barack Obama and talked about his disappointment with John McCain's campaign. This prompted quite a response on the radio the next day from Rush Limbaugh. Let's play the clip.
I just want to button this up because the drive-bys had a tizzy over my allegation that his nomination was about race. Well, let me say it louder. And let me say it even more plainly. It was totally about race.
Let me start with you, Amanda. And the drive-bys is Rush's reference to the drive-by media, as he calls them. He is absolutely entitled to his opinion. But how does he know what Colin Powell's motivation is?
Well, he doesn't. I mean, he's in opinion journalism. This is what he believes. But I do think it's legitimate to question if race did play a role in this endorsement. I mean, I'm trying to, I speak about this very carefully. It was a shocking endorsement 2 weeks before. I think a legitimate question, if Hillary Clinton had gotten the nomination, or John Edwards, would Colin Powell have made that same endorsement? Because he talks about Obama being a transformative figure. And, race might play a role into that. And I think it's okay to talk about.
Well, in fact, let me just jump in here, Kelly. Tom Brokaw asked Powell, could people say this is one African-American endorsing another? And Powell said, look, it would be electrifying for the country and the world where Barack Obama would be elected. But he was very specific in listing all of his complaints about McCain's campaign, including, quite sharply, the selection of Sarah Palin. So I don't see how that makes it all about race.
And furthermore, I just have to say, the way that Amanda phrased it is, it's a fair question to ask. I think the fair question to ask is, would we be discussing this or would we be discussing race if we were talking about two white candidates? And the answer to that question is no, we wouldn't, which is why this comes across as so insulting. I wrote a piece for the Huffington Post where I talked about the fact that when people sort of make inane comparisons of this magnitude, whether it's Rush Limbaugh or Pat Buchanan, who also weighed in on this, I feel embarrassed for them, sort of in the same way you feel embarrassed for, the drunk uncle at a wedding, someone who sort of does something embarrassing in public and your heart sort of goes out for them. But, that being said, you have people like Lindsay Rothschild, you have Joe Lieberman who endorsed.
Kelly, let me jump in because we're very short on time. And by the way, McCain was asked if he agreed with Rush Limbaugh this morning on Meet the President. He said no. William Ayers, we've touched on him, his relationship or lack thereof with Barack Obama. This has been getting a lot of play on Fox News. Let's look at some of what's being said, and it ends with a stakeout by a Fox News producer trying to get some kind of comment from Bill Ayers.
Brand new tape of Bill Ayers saying he's an anarchist and a Marxist.
Now we know that Senator Obama wrote a blurb in the Chicago Tribune praising a book by Ayers.
We do have a picture of Bill Ayers, the unrepentant terrorist, stomping on the American flag, saying
Absolutely.
Free as a bird, guilty as hell.
Thank you.
What a great country.
What's your relationship with Barack Obama? Mr. Ayers, did he write a blurb for your book and sit on a panel with you?
No, this is my property. Would you please leave?
Mr. Ayers, do you want to take this opportunity to apologize for your terrorist acts?
Amanda Carpenter, Bill Ayers, absolute legitimate issue. But when it's done night after night, does it get a little obsessive?
Well, it's kind of incredible to me that this is the only time we've seen Bill Ayers even remotely try to be, asked about the question. For this guy, he was a figure in several presidential debates, and he's just now getting asked by the media. I think there should be more of it.
Okay, Kelly Goff, again, night after night, my question to you is not whether it's fair to talk about Bill Ayers, but whether Fox is on some kind of crusade here.
Well, again, it's just sort of like we were talking about with the endorsements. You can't ever figure out what's in someone else's head, right? You can't.
Well, you can judge a news organizations by what it chooses to emphasize.
Look, there is such a thing as beating the dead horse, and William Ayers is sort of becoming, it seems for some networks and outlets, the Britney Spears of this election cycle, where it's sort of like enough already. But the thing is, it doesn't seem to be gaining any traction in the polls, which I think is the bigger issue, is we're supposed to sort of really follow stories that the voters care about. Voters don't seem to care about this.
But there is a difference between the nighttime shows at Fox and the news. And
sure.
so they
These
have
are
that line
opinion
separate.
shows.
And the opinion shows go after it nonstop, and you know where they're coming from. But the news, I don't think, has done it as heavy-handed.